The following podcast is brought to you by the Arthur Miller Society. Please visit us at arthurmillersociety.net for more information.
That is a $1 million idea.
Something about this play, it's simpler, it's quieter, it's more economic, but it has the same emotional gut punch.
Hi. Welcome to the Arthur Miller Society podcast. My name is Ambika Singh, and I would like to start by wishing all our wonderful listeners a very happy new year. For today's episode, the first of 2021, I'm joined by my co-host, Kieran Leinster. Kieran, a very happy new year to you. How are things with you?
Hi Ambika, happy new year to you as well. I'm doing pretty well, thank you. Looking forward to the new year. How are things with you?
They've been great mostly. But I'm very happy to see the back of 2020. And I look forward to a better year for all of us, for the theatre, and for the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to get too optimistic, but I think hopefully with the rollout of the vaccine, maybe we can look forward to live theatre, live teaching, get the rest of our normal lives back. And I think with the interview that we have for today's episode, with the constant optimism and good nature of our guests, it's a perfect time to hear what they have to say.
Absolutely. Today we have an interview that was recorded in November originally, and it is with Geoff Elliott and Julia Rodriguez-Elliott, producing artistic directors of A Noise Within, based in California. Their live reading of Arthur Miller's 1968 play, The Price, was scheduled for November, but had to be postponed for several reasons. Now it's going ahead at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time from Thursday 21st to Sunday 24th, with a live talkback after reading on Sunday. You can sign up for free tickets and make a donation at anoisewithin.org.
Geoff Elliott and Julia Rodriguez-Elliott both hold a Bachelor of Fine Arts from the University of Florida and a Master of Fine Arts from San Francisco's American Conservatory Theatre. In 1991, they set an ambitious vision for A Noise Within, to establish a home for the classics that will present a challenging repertory, take artistic risks, and ensure accessibility to diverse audiences.
Under their leadership, A Noise Within has received over 30 Los Angeles Drama Critics Circle Awards, the most prestigious honor for excellence in theatre in Los Angeles, a Polly Warfield Award for Excellence, and the Margaret Harford Award for Distinguished Achievement. Their productions are regularly listed as Critics' Choice in the Los Angeles Times. In 2012, they were honored with the inaugural Alumni Contributions to the Field Award by the American Conservatory Theatre, which honors distinguished alumni and supporters who have contributed significant leadership in the field of theatre locally and nationally beyond their role as actors and founders. Between them, they have produced more than 120 productions and directed or co-directed more than 40.
Julia Rodriguez-Elliott has received the 2005 National Latina Business Women's Association Latinas in Business Award in the Arts and Entertainment category, the 2006 Women in Business Award from the California State Senate and Assembly, and the 2010 50 Fabulous Women of Influence in the San Gabriel Valley Award. Geoff Elliott is a recipient of multiple LADCC, Backstage Garland, Robbie, Dramalog, and LA Weekly Awards for performance and direction. In our interview, we spoke about what makes The Price such a powerful work, the ongoing uncertainty for theatre makers, and how the process of producing a live reading compares to real-life theatre. Unfortunately, there is a bit of a hum from a faulty laptop fan over parts of the interview, but it's still all audible. We began by asking where they got the inspiration for the name A Noise Within, and about their founding goals and vision for the company.
It's actually a stage direction in Shakespeare's Hamlet. In the fourth act, Laertes is about to enter and threaten the king's life, and Shakespeare has a direction, A Noise Within. And all that means is the rest of the company is behind the scenery banging trash cans together and stuff to create some kind of brouhaha before Laertes comes in. And Hamlet was our first production. I played Hamlet, Julia played Ophelia. And we were sitting around reading the script, and we looked at that name, and I circled it, and I said, that is a great name. And we wanted something from Hamlet, and the only other one was Drunken Danish Dogs. And we considered it, but we stuck with A Noise Within.
And it's really a
so
great
glad.
Yeah. And it's really a great name in the sense of the creative impulse and this noise that we all have within us that wants to be released and expressed and all of that. So it's had a long-term payoff. In the early days, people were butchering the name, often calling us Noises Off and, all kinds of different things.
And we were in our first 19 years, we were in essentially an empty, abandoned Masonic temple that was 9 stories tall, but there was nothing else in it except us. And it was very echoey, and it took us forever to try to get some kind of an acoustical quality in the building for the performances. So that was another kind of fun reason why we named ourselves A Noise Within.
In terms of the why of the creation of Noise Within, the two of us had trained at the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, and we had trained in that rotating repertory model with a resident company and a focus on the classics. And when we graduated from ACT and ended up in Los Angeles, we found that there were so few opportunities to perform in that seemingly vanishing model. And we so missed it. And it really came out of that we just had a need to fulfill that, our artistic vision that we had been a part of in our training. And so it was really an experiment that, 30 years later, here we are, and it's become an institution. But it really started from that. And we got together with other classmates and put on this production of Hamlet, and one thing led to another.
And in Southern California at the time, there was a real dearth of classical material. Not so much now, but at that time, there were very few companies doing year-round Shakespeare and classical material.
That's fantastic. I hadn't picked up on that, so I'm glad you filled us in. And coming up to 2020, how did you deal with the pandemic in February, March, and to kind of begin with? And did you need to shelve much work?
We did. We had just opened a production of Shakespeare's The Winter's Tale, and that was part of the rep. And then we opened Alice. And the weekend after we opened Alice in Wonderland, we had to shut down. So certainly those 2 productions were shelved. We had planned a production of Sweeney Todd that was also shelved. And we were in the process of announcing our 2021 season. And of course, we had to completely rethink that. And so it's been, right now we're in this responsive model where we're just looking at the conditions such as they are and trying to plan multiple scenarios. But it was a very strange feeling to close productions. I think particularly for the actors to open a show and then shut down 2 days later.
And it's all touch and go right now, as you all know. We're listening to the health officials in the county and the state folks, and doing what we can, and coming up with, again, like everybody else, coming up with different variations and strategies depending upon whether we're going to be able to be in an actual room with people or not.
And it changes what you want to produce too, because the world has changed. And so what seemed like appropriate choices for our original season may not necessarily be appropriate now, as you try to look at how the plays can reflect the moment that we're living in.
What did you do in February, March? Did you do live reads, or did you just close it down and say, we'll see what happens?
At that point, we just closed down, and we thought that we wouldn't be gone for long. And then when it became clear that that was the case, then we really started talking about how can we engage our audiences in this while we're taking this pause. And that's when our virtual program started.
And we were stunned by it, just as everybody else was. A week before we had to shut down, it was mandatory that we had to shut down. I was telling staff, I can't imagine that we're going to have to shut down. It's just not going to happen. This is a blip. So we were all really rocked back on our feet.
All theatre companies have been highly impacted by what's happened. But do you see this pause affecting live theatre for good, or do you think we will have a comeback?
We will come back.
I think we will come back. I don't see what all the virtual programming now as any kind of substitute for theater. I think what it has done is that it's created greater access, and I think that that's positive. And I can see a world when we return where there could be a lot programming that enhances the experience of coming to the theater, whether it's pre and post. Everybody's become rather adept at these Zoom meetings. And I think that there are a lot of opportunities there to make it a richer theater going experience. But a substitute, no.
No, I mean, we are, there's been doom and gloom about live theater for decades and decades. And we're never going to lose live theater. Just our audiences, they are so thirsty for us to come back at this point. It's very moving, actually, the emails we get. But I believe that we're hardwired as a species to be in a room together and tell stories and be told stories. And all of us experience in the same space universal things that we as human beings have in common. And that's too powerful to disappear.
No substitute for breathing together in a space. There just isn't.
There's not.
I love the way you put that, Julia. And I think you can even see it as well in sporting events, because sporting events are they're still going on and people, they're watching them on their computer or whatever, but they are congregating to an extent.
There was a study that was out not long ago. You may have both seen it, in which they studied the heart rate of audiences, and about midway through a performance as they were watching, all of their heart rate settled in to be exactly the same heart rate. Wow. That was a study that was out probably 2 or 3 months ago.
And that's such an important partner, the audience, and you don't get that sense when you're on Zoom. So an entire performance is impacted by the energy and what the audience is bringing to the story. So it's like you're having a conversation with yourself.
Yeah, pretty much like it on most of our days these days.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even for Kieran and I, to be virtual professors these days, teaching classes, it's bizarre, actually. It's not normal at all. We don't feel
it's almost impossible. I mean, our daughter is a teacher in Miami, and she's just having a heck of a time. You're there on Zoom with kids, and they've got masks, and half of them are in class, half of them are at home. It's tough.
Yeah, it's much harder being either primary or secondary teacher now compared to university. I think we have it relatively easy. And so moving on to the virtual readings that you, fortunately, are doing, why did you choose the price for this week's virtual reading? And was there any other Miller plays you were considering and didn't do?
Well, the price for us holds such a special place. It was a play that was in our repertory for almost 5 years, and people just kept coming back to revisit the play. And for me as a director, it's one of my top 5 theater experiences. I absolutely love the play. And so as we were looking at what kind of stories seem to work best in the Zoom environment, the language is key, and the language in this play is extraordinary. And the fact that it's intimate and it's a 4-character play struck us as something that would play well in the Zoom world. Plus, we have 2 of the actors who originally played the roles. So it just seemed like a perfect time to, and certainly the world we're living in right now, like a perfect time to revisit this play.
It's an underrated play. It's I believe that it's one of his best. I really do. And these are 4 people on the precipice. They're all at a real crossroads in their lives. And that's why this play is so supercharged in terms of what's going on between all of these people, including Solomon. So on that level, too, it's quite timely.
You were talking about how Price is an underrated play, and it's never been given the recognition that it deserves. So why do you think it is such an important play?
Anyone with a father and with brothers and sisters and family is going to recognize some part of themselves in this play, in terms of desires, in terms of skeletons in closets, in terms of the supercharged emotions that come from troubled childhoods. There's so much in this play that we all recognize as being a part of the human condition. And I think that's why it's one of his greatest plays. I mean, he's got, it's true, Death of a Salesman overshadows everything. But something about this play, it's simpler, it's quieter, it's more economic, but it has the same emotional gut punch for me that Death of a Salesman or Crucible or All My Sons has.
Yeah, I think, as Geoff said, the universality of family history is just so exquisite in this play. And we all understand that experience where you live under the same roof and you seemingly have had the same experience, and yet you view it, so differently. And I think that this play and the relationship between the brothers and how they experience an event really captures that.
And there's a character in this play who never makes an appearance, the father, who is larger than life, who has caused such deep scars in both of these boys that they've never gotten over.
No, absolutely. And I love that answer. It's so simple. It is. If you grew up with siblings or with family, you're going to feel something in this play. And can I ask then, what's your process for producing these classics? Do you read scholarly work? Do you read biography? Do you read contemporary reviews? Or do you just kind of feel your way into it yourselves?
I think all of the above. As a director, you do all of it. But as is often the case with great plays, it's all in the text. So you always come back to that. As a director, I'd like to look at all that before going into rehearsal. And then once you're in rehearsal, it's really about the artists in the room, the collaboration, and the text.
I think you could say the same thing from an actor's point of view. Julia and I often work together as co-directors, and quite often I'm in the cast, and she will direct, and I'll just be one of the folks up there on stage. So we sometimes have a different perspective depending upon the piece that we're working on. But I think you could say the same thing for the actors, that most actors do a good deal of research before they go into that first read through. I try to get off book if I can, so I don't have to really mess with that script at all. But as Julia said, everything that you do, when it finally comes down to it, it's all there. A play like The Price, every bit of it is in that play. And there are things that you'll discover weeks or months into the thing that you missed that make it even deeper an experience for you.
And plus, there's a part of it with these great classics that for a director, you can get overwhelmed if you start looking at the history of the plays, because there's a part of you that needs to feel when you go into the rehearsals room as if you're the first one approaching it. And not bring all that, history with you. So while it's helpful to look at it at a point, for me, I just have to stop.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in some ways it's the same for academics. You can read too much and you get overwhelmed.
You can, especially with the Shakespeares, but you can do the same thing with Miller and some of the other great playwrights.
And, for live theater, because you've had so many years of experience in live theater, rehearsals go on for months and months. Does it take the same amount of time, or is it much easier to rehearse for a live reading?
It's much, much shorter. The only reason I jumped in here is we do this on Friday, and we had our first rehearsal yesterday. Two of us have been in the play before, so we have a foot up, and the other two were quite wonderful, and they're very well cast. But it's a whole different beast. I can't tell you how frustrating it was yesterday as we were trying to work out all of the technical tics and I couldn't figure out how to maximize and minimize and trying to put the script up on and you're trying to go through the script and you're not able to look at your partner. You have to stare at the script because otherwise the camera makes you look like you're looking the other direction. It's absolutely nerve-wracking. Well, I'm sorry, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say that the directors and the actors do most of their work before they get to the reading. And whereas a rehearsal period, this would be a 5 to 6 week rehearsal period. Here, we're, down to a very short rehearsal time. that's why there's such value in having two of the actors who originally played the roles there, because it really, these great plays live in you, and they come back so quickly, both as a director and as actors. They read through it the first time and it was a little rusty, and by the time they went back, they were pretty close to who they were in the performances. So it's amazing.
It kind of reminds me of Eugene O'Neill's dad playing the Count of Monte Cristo 10,000 times or whatever.
Yeah, look what it did to him.
Yeah.
It's actually
not a great model.
It's really a real treat when you get to revisit these plays, because now it's 10 years later, and you have a different perspective, or you see things and hear things that you might not have heard 10 years ago. You've just lived a little longer.
And Miller.
So you've developed more family resentment since the last time you did the play.
That's right. And Miller is one of those playwrights, especially Miller, that the older you get, the more you appreciate them. Beckett's the same way. The older we get, the more they resonate with us, and we see their brilliance.
Did the previous version of The Price you directed, did that come into preparation for this one? Or did you go back to old notebooks and old notes, or did you just kind of start afresh?
I guess I started fresh, but just in reading the play and revisiting, everything came back to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really have to reference old notes. And, we ended up having lots of conversations about the play and just in the reading of it.
Seriously. To some extent, this is a play rooted in Miller's own life and experiences. How does that affect how you approach the play? And this is a question especially for Geoff, because he's playing Victor in the play. Do those autobiographical elements register with you, or you just take the character as it is written in the script?
It's interesting. I don't spend that much time. I haven't spent that much time thinking. This is his piece of art, and obviously a big part of him is in that play. His heart is pumping in that play, and at the same time, it's the play. So I don't so much see Arthur Miller, and it's interesting to me. Miller, I always thought that Victor was who Miller most related to, and I could be wrong there. He had an older brother, and Victor is the younger brother in this play. So I've always assumed, because Victor is more of the everyman. He's the worker on the street. He's one of those. He's a kind of. He's allowed himself to be that, a person of service to others for whatever reason. Whereas Walter has fled the whole situation. So I always thought of Victor more as the Arthur Miller character. But in either case, that didn't really affect me all that much. As we said, the play is everything, and it's all there in that play.
Mm-hmm. And does that come into it for you at all, Julia? The potential autobiographical nature of the play?
Only to the extent that the play feels so specific, and his language is so specific that you sense something very personal in play. But I think that all the great ones, you have that sense. So it doesn't for me.
But boy, if anybody understood brothers, Arthur Miller understood brothers and their relationship to their fathers and their mothers. Unparalleled, really, in terms of his understanding of that.
I have to ask then, sorry, Geoff, I assume you've got brothers, or at least one.
But me, I do.
I had my first Zoom call with my own brother on Friday night last week. So I thought it was a great kind of foreshadowing. We just didn't have that especially close relationship. So I'm really glad you've highlighted that.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And I could probably say the same. So, that's the thing, is that every family is fraught with at least some of this.
Yeah, the whole tussle between the siblings and the parents choosing one over the other in some part of the childhood that impacts you. Like, I've always thought that my parents love my elder brother more than they love me. So that stays with me all the time. And, the one sibling turning to be this self-sacrificing person, staying with parents and taking care of everybody. And then there's another one who has chased ambitions. So, why we thought that Miller was more of Walter is because Walter gets to go to college and Victor is the one who stays back and takes responsibility for parents. So he becomes this self-sacrificing character in the play while the brother gets to enjoy his life to move ahead with ambition. So which is why we compared. Otherwise, as you said, that Miller was the younger sibling, as is Walter in the play. So that whole connection, you've highlighted it very right, that there is an element of Miller's autobiography in both the brothers in a way. It's not just one character.
Yes.
I think that's absolutely right. I think he is both of them. And he sees it from both ends. I'm sure that there were times in his life he felt like a Victor, and at times that he felt like a Walter. Exactly. But the thing that drives them together is this common experience that was so scarring for the both of them, that they both went through in the same room, and the different ways that they dealt with it, because we're all so different.
Well, and it's interesting because what you describe in terms of the self-sacrificing brother and the one that went and sought, what seems to be self-serving opportunities is Act 1 in the play. But really, Act 2, if you track the argument, and that was always a very interesting thing the first time we did it in the rehearsal process, that we would stop and have to very carefully track the argument that each of the brothers is making. You realize that it's much more nuanced than that. And so then there are questions of did Victor use this event as a crutch in terms of making choices in his own life and all of that it all is not what it seems in Act 1.
No, definitely not. So Miller talked about keeping a fine balance of sympathy between the two brothers. Do you find this naturally occurring when you're rehearsing and producing, or do you need to work at it? Because Victor, in a lot of ways, is more immediately sympathetic. Like you say, we do spend Act 1 with him. Yes,
I think that it's in the text that the characters are sympathetic. I could see the danger of not exploring it deeply enough and not finding that. But I think the key again is that second act and really looking at the tracking of the argument. And I think it does reveal itself very much that way in the second half. That if you were talking about winners and losers, I think that both of them were victims of the situation they were in.
My heart goes out to great playwrights because they have to give it over and somebody else gets to take it and do what they want to with it. But it's clear that Miller was worried that productions would treat these two men as some kind of a stereotypic thing. One guy's a bad guy, one guy's the good guy, et cetera, which is why he has his little monologue at the end of the script that I have, in which he says, be careful because they are both right, essentially. And if you have a cast in which people know what they're doing, and I think this is a cast in which we know what we're doing, it does reveal itself. And they all are filled with extraordinary humanity by the end of this thing.
Absolutely, because we have to see characters as full human beings and not just as a bad character and a good character. Yes. As we observe that the play is also very much in the shadows of depression. So is it, because obviously your theatre company takes up classics and sees them as historical pieces also. So have you updated the play to suit the current times, or do you usually take it up as a period drama, as something which is under the impression of depression?
It really depends on the play. If we're talking about Shakespeare and others, generally, it's not museum theater for us. And so when we approach Shakespeare, we try to look at, what's going on in our world today and how can we make this work accessible, vital, and relevant. In the case of The Price, it's set in the period. there's so much about that play that is speaking to us in the here and now that I just don't see any reason not to. And in a way, it's more powerful that way because we're looking at history repeating itself. So we didn't really see a need for an update. I think it's stronger in that period, whether we're talking the crash, where we're talking 67, whether we're talking 2020. Unfortunately, we're still dealing with the same societal issues and economic issues that the play is addressing.
Yes, and that's what I was going to say. Is the present day of this play is 1967 in New York City, and obviously everything that happened to them was in the 20s, late 20s, the crash, etc. And in the 60s, especially the late 60s, New York City was about to explode. We had the Vietnam War. We had the economic crisis. We had so many racial tensions, police corruption. So it was just about to explode. Again, it's so timely because all of these people, and even that city, is on a kind of a precipice. So to change it would not serve the play, in my opinion. I think you want to do it the way he wrote it. When we're doing a Shakespeare or we're doing some other classic and classical pieces, there are times we will update it. We will put it in a different place than Elizabethan. We'll do some things to it, but not this play.
And part of the rule is if it does it illuminate the text or does it obfuscate it? And in this case, to try to set it in a different period, it doesn't do anything to illuminate the story. So. Not to mention, I'm not sure that you would even be able to get the rights if you set it in a different period.
Well, yeah, I was going to mention that it kind of is a perpetual issue for directors and companies. And you've kind of mentioned before, but a lot of critics have seen the echoes here with Salesman, especially noting that Walter and Victor could be happy in Biff 20 years on. In general, when you're producing Miller, do you find it difficult to avoid that looming shadow of Salesman or even The Crucible over what you're doing? Or can you approach them as like completely independent, free works?
I think that all of that is more of an issue for critics and the press and all of that. That has not been my experience with actors, directors, or audiences in any way, shape, or form.
No.
So we'll let them duke it out.
Yeah, totally.
I'm on your side on this one, absolutely.
Yeah, and you can say the same for all of his stuff, or all of my sons. Another standalone gut punch of a play, but it's very easy when you're in the middle of it because you become so submerged in his world that you even forget that he ever wrote another play, much less think about it in some way or think about this being Biff and Hap 20 years later. It just doesn't feed into it.
And as Geoff said earlier, I think the power of this play is that, to me, Salesmen and All My Sons, they're Greek. And when you look at this, at the price, it's a much more, close to the bone, intimate piece, chamber piece.
Now, leaving the brothers aside, coming to the character of Esther, she seems perpetually caught in the middle, unsure of whose values she wants to approve of. Having been criticized previously for his female characters, I find this ambiguity Miller creates really intriguing. How do you interpret her actions in the play? Because we see her siding the brother-in-law, when it comes to money. So, what kind of values does she embody?
Yeah, she's such an interesting character because it's that she's living in this quiet desperation that she just doesn't know who she is anymore, and I think that's why you see a lot of this, vacillating. And for me, there's an interesting thing about it, in that I think about knowing women who have basically raised their children and then their children leave home. And they have a really challenging time with figuring out who they are, not only who they are in terms of the relationship with their partner, but just who they are as women. And Esther seems to be going through that. And to me, what's beautiful to me about the character is that ultimately at the end of the play, she really stands up for Victor, and you get a sense that their relationship, at least it's on a journey to changing. And I see that as a very positive thing. But you're right. There's the complication of her drinking and all that she's going through, and missed opportunities in her life, and the I wish we had ... element to her that makes her, to me, a really fascinating character.
And Victor has, I believe, a deeper sense of denial over it all. He goes into a kind of an auto mode in terms of the denials, the things that are keeping him from taking a next step in his life. I don't think he even realizes he's doing it much of the time until he's finally has it driven out of him by his brother and his wife and this situation that they find themselves in. Whereas Esther, from the beginning of this play, her denial is very superficial. It's a very thin layer because she's really had it in terms of seeing what's happening to him. And she's not in the same kind of denial that he is about how stuck he is in his life. But as Julia said, it is beautiful. Deborah Strang, who plays Esther, is just wonderful. And they come to an understanding. There's a kind of a greater sense of respect that they have for each other, the two of them. Their relationship deepens somehow, at least a little bit by the end of this play, which is beautiful.
I think also returning to that environment, there's a lot of things that connect him to, who they were and why they're together. Clearly they share a similar sense of humor and some of the residents in the household. And so in some ways, the return to this place is healing for the two of them.
At the same time, horrific, because they both realize in the first 2 pages of this play, they were young people not that long ago. And life just goes by so quickly. And that's something else that hits them both in the face when they walk through that door, how quickly they've become middle-aged.
Yeah, it's really a play for everyone about being forced to look at themselves and look at what's happened and where they've come from. And kind of coming back then to the fourth member of the quartet, Solomon is this kind of great character. He comes out of almost nowhere. Quite rarely for Miller, he's deliberately and successfully very funny. Do you think there's any chance that he runs the risk of becoming a Jewish stereotype figure, or does he need to be changed in any way to avoid this?
I thought that was a really interesting question, and I don't think so. I believe that, to me, that sort of that his shtick, which is very steep in vaudeville, is part of what he uses as a way in, and certainly makes him a great salesperson. And at the same time, he's very vulnerable very quickly in the first act with Victor in terms of opening up about, his own fears about mortality. And in a very, he's in a very vulnerable way. I don't know how else to put it, along with this other thing that he does.
They're all bursting with humanity. That's what I find in Solomon too. I can't imagine that he shares his daughter's suicide with everybody. There is something about this moment in time and this younger man who's a cop, that he's something about all of this brings out such a vulnerability in him that you can't help but fall in love with him. So I don't either. I don't see it. I don't see a stereotypic or offensive thing about Solomon himself. I find him so human.
I think he disarms the people around him, with that humor, and they let them in a way that might not be possible if he were not who he is.
Absolutely. I think Solomon would be hands down, my favorite character in the play. There have been, obviously there's this larger humanity about his character. I don't even see him as a stereotype in any way. Like he is not somebody you can easily stereotype. He's very human. He's large. He's universal. And there's so much, innocence in his character, despite the fact that he is coming off with a lot of experience and sadness, and obviously his daughter's suicide and all the past that he is carrying with himself. But he still comes across as a very strongly innocent character in the play to me. Despite the negotiations back and forth and the tricks that he's using to get them into it.
And he's almost 90 years old. So he has a kind of wisdom that no one else in this play has.
The only one who's really living in reality is Solomon.
I agree. And of course, he is so aptly named also. Christopher Bixby, Miller's biographer, comments on Solomon's character that he acts not merely as a chorus, but also as a moral arbiter between Walter's seemingly callous realism and Victor's apparent good nature. Why is it important that Solomon has this blend of humor and stark moral seriousness? I think the question echoes a lot with what we were just discussing. That he is just not playing a mediator or a kind of chorus. He's much more than that.
It's interesting, and I have to. I'm a director too, but with this production, I was absolutely just an actor. So I only see it really in those terms. And I don't see him so much as an arbiter of these different moralistic worlds in these people. I see him doing the things he needs to do to survive. And that's what I saw in our production when a wonderful actor named Len Lesser played the role. And I see it with the fellow we have playing it now, Apollo Dukakis, that he's really just trying to get through the thing. He and Victor have somehow created a bond together. He sees him being beat up. And also, Solomon realizes that if he can get this furniture, it's going to keep him alive a little longer. He realizes that it really gives him that resurgence of energy again. So I look at from an actor's point of view, I look at all things in terms of objective and obstacles, and what is it that we want and what's keeping us from getting it. So I just see him maneuvering in this world like everybody else in this cast. Do you have a more global thought about him?
I hear that.
Yeah.
And Geoff, so I want to go back to something you said about All My Sons. You said Miller's genius lies in his ability to create a story that has such universal themes that it ends up being prophetic. Do you think the same holds true for The Price?
Gosh, yes. Yes. Easily. Again, as we talked about a little while ago, if you have family, then you are going to relate to so much of this play, just as you will if you have troubles and you're watching All My Sons or Death of a Salesman. They all are so searing in terms of that experience, that relationship that we have with our close family, that I can't help but feel as though it's as if it's a crystal ball.
Going back to Solomon for a minute, I was sitting here thinking, and that he also has the ability to simplify these overly complicated situations. There's one of my favorite lines with him is like, your father, so what was wrong with him? He couldn't get a job, and things that are really rather, they've overcomplicated, this event for the father. And he just said, what was wrong with him? Why couldn't he just go out and get a job?
Yeah, I think that
he has a short line that essentially is the fundamental meaning of this entire play. Solomon says, it's a mental world.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that goes on in this world goes on between our two ears, and that's it. Mm-hmm. You get to choose on some level. It's a mental world.
I think he's tremendously funny, very, very wise, very funny, full of knowledge, experience. And like you mentioned, that this particular part, where he says that, what was wrong with your father? Why could he not work? Like, I resurrected myself so many times. I got out of trouble so many times, rebuilt my life. So that's very funny. And another point, I think, another starting point of his humor, when he is introduced to Esther, and he says, "Nice suit," and then she leaves, and then he has things to say about her.
Yeah, that's right.
And Geoff and I were talking about that, and it's really interesting because all these plays, depending on the time that you're performing it, to me, the whole experience between the mother and father, it speaks so much to white privilege. The father just fell apart. He couldn't cope. He was too good to go get a job at a grocery store or something. And that in the most important event in their lives, all the mother could do was throw up all over him, when he tells her that they've lost everything they had.
Throw up all over his tuxedo as well. Which understands.
Yes, and he stood there and let it dry on his hands.
Yes. I mean, that image is so powerful to me.
It's so, wow.
Yeah.
At first, when I was reading the play, I thought, maybe I'm misreading it. I'm not able to understand what they're saying. But later I got to know it was really it was about actual throwing up.
Throwing up, yeah.
All right. Miller also wrote that he was moved to write this play to confront and to confound the Vietnam War and the avant-garde plays popular in the 60s. He particularly wanted to react to the condemnation of plays with a beginning, middle, and end as well-made plays. So it was a kind of reaction to the experimental theater at that point of time, and also to the Vietnam War. So does it register with you?
I think it does, to the extent that, the historical context of a play is really important. And even though the Vietnam War is never mentioned in the text, it's certainly the world that these people are living in. And so that's part of what they're coming in with. And I think it becomes an important piece of it. Geoff was talking a little bit about what it meant to be a cop during that time. And he talks about, the world out there, it's about to blow up, and you'll be happy that you can call a cop. And so those burdens come in with the characters. So it is absolutely, important in terms of the well-made play. It's in there and it swims around, but it's not something that you can actively engage with in the way that you can when you think about the events of that time, whether the play focuses on it or not. I mean, Miller is interesting because he always, I know he was a big fan of Clifford Odets. And so the issue of class and economics is always so strongly in his plays, even if it's not, overt, it's always living in it. And it's very much a part of this play as well.
And if there ever was a well-made play, The Price is certainly a well-made play, just in terms of it being an extraordinary piece of art. If he was motivated by defending what he does by writing this play, thank God he had critics.
Yeah.
Because that's what he did. That's right, because that's what he did. He wrote plays with beginnings, middles, and ends, even though they're not completely conclusive. Shakespeare did the same thing. These great playwrights don't wrap it up in a nice, neat bow by the end, but they write something that human beings can completely, in that moment in time, relate to.
And for him, this play is less conclusive than some of his others. When I think of All My Sons and Death of a Salesman, this one is most certainly, much more ambiguous.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask, because he said it was a play without any candy. And it's still really striking that at the end of the play, Walter throws the dress in his face, storms off, and then Victor and Esther have to say, well, I guess we'll take Solomon's $1,100. and we'll go to the cinema and you'll wear your cop uniform. And that's it. It's such an antithesis to the conclusion, to the closure that you get with the gunshot in All My Sons and Salesman. So what do you think this change in his endings is? Where does that come from? What's that about?
I don't know. It's a really great point. I'm not sure. I suppose on some level he wanted to shock us. He wanted to kick us a little bit. I think of the ending of No Country for Old Men. You've seen the film?
Yeah.
Yes, it was so overwhelmingly criticized because people did not get that thing that they wanted. And on a level, obviously, it was intentional with Miller. I think he probably wanted to just give it to us a little bit.
I love the ending because it really, my experience was with audiences and in our post-show conversations with them, it's depending on who you are and where you come from, you see that ending in a different way. And, and that's what I love about these plays that don't tie it up in a nice, neat little bow. We happen to think, I'm optimistic about the Victor and Esther relationship. Don't so much know about, Walter and Victor, but there are people that saw that was a possibility. And then there are others that thought, oh my God, these people are just going back to the same old thing they've always done and nothing has changed. And so it really depends on where you are in that particular moment in time and what you need.
So you can choose your own candy.
Yes, exactly.
That's right. That's right.
Pick whatever.
It'll either be sweet or it'll be a sour drop.
That's right. That's right.
So because, there are illusions and pipe dreams that we are talking about in the play somewhere, it emphasizes on that. And there are certain echoes that we see of the Iceman comet here. So do you see a similarity, though Miller never acknowledged it, but do you see a similarity here between the two plays? Do you see the impressions here?
I see some of those themes that are, they're always so strong in Miller, that sort of illusions, whether it's, Death of a Salesman or, Keller and, in All My Sons, people living in that world. To me,
View from the Bridge.
To me, it's much more Ibsen, in that you get into this play and it's all about the past. And these characters come in with all that history more than I think about O'Neill. But certainly their writing, to me, O'Neill too, it's Greek and scale and scope. So I do see those similarities there.
I don't really know what their relationship was. Do you? Were they friends? I don't really even know.
No, by the time Miller came on the scene, O'Neill was extremely ill. So
okay.
I think he invited him to, Salesman or All My Sons, but he couldn't make it. And then, like you're saying, Julia, so much more influenced by Odette's. And so many of the things that O'Neill did, Miller just kind of, he just kind of missed, I think. They were never really his core influence.
Do you know who Lynn Lesser was? Lynn passed away a few years ago, but he was an older man, obviously. If you ever watched Seinfeld, he played Uncle Leo on Seinfeld. I don't know if you remember that character.
I don't think so.
He had worked with about every actor, Hollywood actor on the planet. He was a workmanlike actor, and he'd been in so many different things. But it's just very funny. He was living when about the time that Miller was creating Death of a Salesman. Lynn lived in New York with his family, only a couple of blocks away from where Miller lived. And Lynn was convinced, because Lynn had a knockdown, drag-out fight with his father at the stoop of his brownstone with a lot of people walking by. He was convinced that Arthur Miller must have been walking by, heard this fight between the father and the son, and that's why he created Death of a Salesman. So Lynn was sure that he was really the impetus for Death of a Salesman.
I love that because there's 100 million fathers and sons who could have been the influence.
Exactly. Actually, Lynn was just sure.
That's fantastic.
Yes, Lynn played Solomon in our first production.
That makes a lot of sense, that tie-in. And is there? I'm gonna ask. I'm curious. Is there any play that you haven't done, or what plays have you not done that you really can't wait to do?
Death of a Salesman.
You haven't done Death of a Salesman?
No, we've been trying to get rights for years, but we're in LA, which is a major market, and so unfortunately, there's constantly restrictions coming up. So we've been trying to get rights for it for maybe over 7 years, something like that.
Anything else outside of the Miller-verse?
We've gotten to do so many great plays that we tend to, there's never been a play that we thought, we can't do that other than not having the ability to get rights. And so we tend to fall in love with the plays as we're selecting them and choosing the season more than pulling from the list of we would love to do. We're very lucky that way because having been doing this for almost 30 years now, we've gotten to do some really great plays.
Oh, we're terribly spoiled. When it comes to that. We really are terribly spoiled. We were at that abandoned Masonic temple for 19 years, believe it or not. And then we were able to successfully pull off a capital campaign to build a new building in Pasadena, which is our permanent home. And it's a beautiful physical plan. But the Masonic temple, after we left that place, I went back one day. I still had the keys. And I went back and I went up to the third floor where the theater had been. And I stood there imagining all of the words that had bathed the walls of that room for 19 years. And I actually started weeping because it was so powerful. So much had happened there. So many great plays, so many great words and things and visions and great performances. That we're just terribly spoiled.
And one of the wonderful things I think about the space that we're in is just the intimacy of the experience. We seat about 320 in a 3/4 thrust. And so we have the opportunity to do these big, epic, canvas plays, large canvas plays in a real intimate setting. And that's a real treat for the actors and I think for audiences because they're, usually they're used to seeing these plays in 1,000, 1,200 seat houses and all of that. And they get to have an up and close and personal experience with these, larger than life stories.
And we have a resident company that we've worked with. Some of them we've worked with for almost 30 years and many of the others anywhere from 2 to 17, 18 years. So we have a kind of a shortcut with each other that we're able to get down to it very quickly and really begin working at a certain level because we know each other so well.
That's fantastic. Yeah, like you say, you are extremely lucky. Ambika, did you have anything else?
No, I'm just overwhelmed with their hope. They are not complaining at all. They are very happy. I thought we would be, meeting people who are, very upset that live theater is not on. What do we do? But you're so hopeful. It's so good to see you.
Oh, well, that's great. Well, thank you. Thank you. We've got a lot to be grateful for. We really do. And
we've built an incredible community. I think that the model that especially the Brits have so nurtured of the classics repertory resident company really builds community in a real unique way. And that's what sees you through these challenging times because the company is invested not only in the mission of the organization, but the artists. And so it's very powerful, and that can see you through a lot.
Yeah, they are family, and we also have 2 kids who are doing really, really well, and they're healthy and happy. So I'm not sure you can ask for anything else.
And that was our interview with Geoff and Julia from The Noise Within. I just love that little positive note at the end there, so I thought it was the perfect place to end it. Ambika, what did you think?
Absolutely loved it, Kieran. I think their passion for the play and for theatre and performance in general came across really strongly in the interview. I especially liked their discussion on the family dynamics within the play. It really reminded me of how important this work is, how powerful it is till now, and how much is still left unsaid about it.
Yes, absolutely. I think I definitely got a different perspective on the play listening to them. Well, anyway, that is all we have for today. I want to thank Geoff and Julia again for the interview and remind you that you can register for free tickets and make a donation at anoisewithin.org. Their reading of The Price is live each evening from Thursday the 21st of January to Sunday the 24th at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And don't forget the live talkback after Sunday's show. Ambika, thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. It was really very good to be back, seriously. And thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of the Arthur Miller Society podcast. You can find us on Spotify or Google us to find the player that works best for you. Follow the Arthur Miller Society on Facebook and Twitter, and we'll speak to you again soon. Take care.
Thanks so much. Goodbye.